So I spent my first year of teaching doing all the same classroom management strategies that everyone else was using, and it just wasn't working for me. I found things on social media like clip charts, dust pets, blurt beans, student stores, student bucks, taking away recess, raising my voice, etc., but none of it was working. I would start a lesson and I would constantly have to stop because my students were talking to each other, getting up out of their seat, getting distracted, and just not focused on the lesson. And I felt like I spent more time putting out fires than actually getting to teach my kids. And it got to the point where their scores started to reflect that. And it wasn't until I finally found a teacher, Miss May from One Fab Teacher, who was doing things her own way, and it inspired me to discover my own unique style when it comes to classroom management. So today we're going to be talking about how I found my classroom management style and how you can too. So with that being said, let's dive in. So after I discovered that I was chasing strategies that everyone else was using, that I wasn't actually picking strategies that were aligned to me, I asked myself these three questions to get clear on what my teaching style was so I can start picking strategies that were aligned to my specific classroom management style. So here's the first question I want you to ask yourself when it comes to figuring out your classroom management style. The first one is 5 years from now, what kind of teacher are you going to be? When you picture yourself 5 years from now, what kind of teacher are you? Are you worrying about managing your classroom, or does it kind of just like flow with ease and come easy and natural to you? Are you focused on community? Are you fun and engaging? Are you laid back? Are you sarcastic? What does it feel like to sit in a class and watch you teach 5 years from now when you have it all figured out? So take some time to pause wherever you're tuning in from and really think about that question. 5 years from now, what kind of teacher are you going to be? The second question to ask yourself is, which strategies have I tried that fit that kind of teacher and get me excited about teaching? Make sure to brainstorm all the strategies you've tried in the last couple of years or the last year, and to get clear on which of those strategies the 5 year version of you in the future would still be using in their classroom. Which strategies have you tried that have actually made you feel excited and good about teaching? Continue doing those and leave the rest. So, as a recap, the second question to ask yourself is, which strategies have I tried that fit that kind of teacher and get me excited about teaching? By that I mean the 5 year version of you. The third and final question I want you to ask yourself is, which strategies have I tried that don't fit with the 5 year future version I'm becoming and makes me feel icky about what I'm doing in the classroom? You see, when I was a first year teacher, I listened to a lot of advice that as soon as I heard it made me think, oof, that's not going to work, or I don't really want to try that, but I feel like I have to, or well, that's not something I would do, but I mean, they're more experienced than I am, so maybe I should listen to them. When I did that, more often than not, those strategies didn't work for me because they weren't aligned to me. When you are in alignment and you're using strategies that are actually going to work well with your classroom management style, typically they feel exciting. A great example of this is when I discovered that I was actually teaching classroom procedures wrong in my classroom, and I could instead teach them in a way that was very similar to actually teaching content in the classroom, to where my students could use it as habits and they could do it automatically without me having to think about it. That was oh yes, that's it, that's the next right step. Whereas when the experienced teachers I went to for advice told me to take away that kid's recess when they were doing X, Y, and Z, I didn't necessarily agree with it. I did it, but it didn't make me feel great. Or clip charts. Clip charts was something that a lot of teachers in my building and even my mentor teachers were using. But whenever I used it, I felt terrible about it. It just made me feel so upset, and I felt like my kids weren't actually getting missing the point on what we were trying to do. And so I did it anyways, and I didn't listen to myself. And I found much better strategies once I decided to listen to myself and follow those aligned strategies. So, going back to the question, which strategies have you tried that don't fit with that future version of you and make you feel icky about what you're doing in the classroom? Which strategies have you tried in the past that future you wouldn't have in their classroom or makes you feel icky or like you should have to or should be doing it that way, even if it doesn't really work for you? Make sure to look at these strategies and maybe cut out or see if you can find an alternative to some of these. For example, instead of using a clip chart, once I discovered that just didn't work well with my classroom management style, I'm not saying that's wrong with anybody who really loves them, it just doesn't work for my style. I ended up leaning towards sideline conversations. I pull my kids to the side and have a conversation about the specific skill and the communication and where the miscommunication is happening and how they could do better next time. And that works way better for my personality and my classroom management style than necessarily calling my students out and having them clip up or clip down based off of a decision they make throughout the day. So now that you've asked those 3 questions, so as a quick recap, we have 5 years from now, what kind of teacher do you want to be? The second question, which strategies is that 5-year version of you using in their classroom that gets them excited about teaching? Third thing, which strategies have you tried that don't fit that 5-year version of you and make you feel icky or like you have to or guilty that you're not using it correctly? Now that we talked about those 3 questions, let's talk about how you can discover your classroom management style. So reflect on what you wrote so far and pick which one best describes you. And you can be a combination of several of these different classroom management styles. I am a combination of a couple of different ones, for example, and I'll dive into that in a minute. So the first classroom management style is a routine queen. So the vibe is they're structured, organized, thrives on consistency and predictability. Their strengths are that they rely on smooth transitions, clear expectations, and students feel safe. The challenges may struggle when things get off schedule. They are more flexible or with more flexible learners that require learning outside of the norms or more flexibility in the way that they learn. Here are some ideal strategies if you fit in as someone who's a routine queen. You do well with daily routines, visual schedules, posted procedures, and timers. So an example could be if you love colored coded bins, morning routines, and have procedures for everything, this might be your style. That's the first classroom management style. The second classroom management style is the relationship builder. The vibe of the relationship builder is you're really empathetic. You really feel what your students are feeling. You try to put yourself in their shoes, and you're very student-centered. You focus on connection and trust before everything else. Your strengths, if you have strong student buy-in and strong student relationships, and you're really good at creating an emotionally safe environment. Some of the challenges someone with this classroom management style might run into is they can sometimes be a little too lenient or avoid firm boundaries because they have such strong relationships with their students. It can be easy to kind of gray some areas for you. Ideal strategies for this kind of classroom management style would be morning meetings, restorative conversations, and class circles. You really thrive off that community. And you probably know all your students' favorite snacks and family stories by week 2, if you are this type. So that's the second classroom management style. The third classroom management style you might be is the strategy slayer. So the vibe of the strategy slayer is they are intentional, system-minded, focus on proactive structure and tools. Their strengths is they're very strategic when it comes to classroom setup. They create preventative behavior systems. They like to prevent behaviors from happening in the first place, and they really rely on those systems to do so. They also like to plan and create systems that get them ahead on planning and prepping in a way that makes it feel almost like cheating. It's so easy. The challenges that someone with this classroom management style might face is they might overplan or get stuck tweaking things constantly because they're always trying to perfect their systems. Ideal strategies for this person could be a seating chart, student jobs, reward systems, and visual cues. If you are this type, you're always thinking 3 steps ahead and love optimizing how your classroom runs. If you are this type, you can probably tell from my content that I'm also part of this type. I really like relying on systems in my classroom to make things easier, and I like sharing them with you. So as I'm constantly tweaking and making them better, I can help maybe spark some ideas in you too. The next classroom management style is the calm anchor. So if you are the calm anchor, the vibe here is you're chill, grounded, handles chaos with a zen-like presence. It takes a lot for your students to make you upset or to get a rise out of you. You're very good at staying calm and neutral and just relaxing and separating your students' behavior from your identity. So your strengths could be that you de-escalate situations very well, you maintain composure, and you set a tone through energy. You're all about setting the vibe in the classroom based off of how you show up, and you can really see that reflected through your students. The challenges this classroom management style might face is that they might be perceived as passive if not balanced with clear expectations. So finding that balance between passive and calm and letting your students do what they want, but also having clear expectations of what's expected in the classroom. Ideal strategies for this particular classroom management style is call and response signals, mindfulness moments, and nonverbal cues. And if you are this type, or students calm down just by being around you, but don't mistake your calm for weakness. If you are this type, this is the second type I tend to go into. I can be energetic when I teach, but when my students get loud, I tend to get quiet and I rely heavily on my energy and how I show up in the classroom to set the tone of the class. And as you can imagine, that was really hard for me when I had, say, a teacher's assistant who was very high energy and liked to yell and raise her voice a lot. It was very offsetting for my calm nature in the classroom. And so having a good, being able to identify that what kind of classroom management style I have now, I can see now why that was really hard for me. But when my students are escalating, I like to calm my energy and bring forth the conversation on how we can bring our energy down and really check in with the vibe of the classroom to make sure we are going a productive path. The last classroom management style is the creative connector. So the vibe of this teacher is spontaneous, expressive, uses creativity to engage students and manage behaviors. The strength of this teacher is they love keeping students engaged and they make learning feel magical. The challenges may lack consistency or have trouble sticking to systems. And the ideal strategies for this teacher is gamified procedures, classroom themes, role play routines. If you are this kind of classroom management style, you're turning routines into songs and using puppets to teach procedures, and your students eat it up. You like making things your own and putting your own creative spin to it, which makes it really, really fun. So those are the different types of classroom management styles. And as I said, you can be a combination of all of these or really emphasize on 2 or a couple of these, but these are really good to keep in mind as you're moving forward and picking out strategies that align with your classroom management style. So now that we talked about the different classroom management styles, let's talk about picking the right strategies for your type. So the first thing is make sure that you are picking ones that make you excited for teaching. We talked about alignment earlier. The aligned classroom management strategies for you moving forward are going to be the ones that make you excited. For example, sideline conversations with my students was something that really worked for me, and heavily relying on those classroom expectations and procedures and those systems to prevent disruptive behavior was working well for me, as opposed to what everyone was using, which at the time was clip charts. And that didn't work well for me, and I felt like I had to do it, and I tried it, but it just didn't work for me, and it caused more problems than honestly it solved. And then the second thing is avoiding the ones you dread or feel like you should or have to do because someone told you to. The reality is you know yourself best, you know your classroom best, and you know your style best and your kids best. You're gonna find strategies that work well for you. And all that teaching is, honestly, as I look back through my teaching profession, is I started off using what everyone else was using, but throughout the years, I got different ideas and I kind of just morphed them into my own unique concoction of a classroom management plan that worked well for me. And now I share it online with you to spark ideas. But there's no one right or wrong way to go about managing a classroom. It's all about having fun, experimenting, exploring, and making things your own, and really finding and honing in on those strategies that work best for you. And this can come from my systematic approach, that style we talked about earlier, but I love tweaking it as I go, and it's perfectly fine to tweak and get better as you go. A lot of the teachers I've had on my podcast that are classroom management pros are the ones that struggled with it. And a majority of the time, they found strategies that worked for them and their classroom management style. So don't be afraid to turn down strategies that other teachers are using because you feel like you should do it, and start leaning into the ones that feel right to you and make you feel excited. So here's an example. So I'm a strategist, so I love to create systems where my classroom runs on autopilot and the classroom runs for me. I love having my centers run for me so I can sit back, sip my coffee, work on a small group, and have my students continue centers without me and check in with each other. And I don't have to do a thing. And if I need to finish up a conversation or a quick skill or something with a student, I'm not worried about having to wrap up or my students out there. They run it for me. And that's just leaning into my style and really getting comfortable with who I am and what sets me apart from other teachers, and learning to do things my own way that fit that strategy. So, as I said earlier, I'm also a calm anchor. I emphasize on classroom calls and whispering as opposed to raising my voice. When my students get loud, I get quiet. In fact, sometimes when my students have been loud for a couple days in a row, I'll lose my voice. And some of my old students are following me now, which is crazy to say. So I'm outing myself right now. But I would whisper and have whisper days where I would lose my voice to reset the tone of the classroom, and it would work. I would lose my voice for a day and everyone had to whisper, and it was amazing. So leaning into the different things that make you unique and making them your own is really where you're going to start to see a difference in your classroom management. So that wraps up everything in regards to figuring out your unique classroom management style. So let's recap what we talked about so far. The first thing we talked about were the 3 questions to ask yourself to really get clear on what your classroom management style was. We talked about what kind of teacher are you going to be 5 years from now if you were to go into the future and sit in and observe your class. The second thing, which strategies have you tried that feel amazing and your future self still uses? Third thing, which strategies have you tried that made you feel icky or guilty or like you have to use them? Make sure to start cutting those out and finding alternatives that fit more to your style. After we talked about that, we talked about how to discover your classroom management style. There are 5 different ones. We talked about the routine queen, the strategies layer, the relationship builder, calm anchor, and creative connector. And we talked about how you can be a combination of several of these. For example, I'm a combination of several of these, and how you can kind of pick and choose and kind of use both to your benefit, or however many to your benefit. I even gave you strategies for each different classroom management style. And then we talked about how to choose strategies that'll fit your unique style and my personal examples of how throughout my teaching career I've really discovered which strategies work best for me. So that wraps up everything in regards to your classroom management style. Which classroom management style are you? Let me know in the comments or send me a DM. I would love to chat and hear from you which classroom management style you are. If you want to dive deeper into classroom management, the first thing, I have a ton of free content, over 20 now weeks of content on classroom management, so make sure to check it out wherever you're tuning in from. Make sure to subscribe and like so we can get more teachers more information about good classroom management strategies that can inspire them to lean into who they are and to create their own unique classroom management plan. The second thing is, if you want me to give you my top 10 classroom management strategies that have worked for me over my teaching experience, make sure to check out the Classroom Management Guide. This is my free guide. It answers the top 10 most commonly asked questions I get about managing a classroom and disruptive behavior, and I answer those. And what I love about it is I link to podcasts and YouTube videos because I have a ton of content now, over 100 weeks of content. And instead of having to sift through all my content, you can just go to that guide, And if you want a further explanation than what I give in that guide, you can then click to that podcast or YouTube video for a deeper understanding or a deeper explanation. The second thing, if you're wanting kind of done for you, you want me to give you the resources I'm using in my classroom and many of the teachers that I coach, what they're using in their classrooms for classroom management, make sure to check out my classroom management bundle. What I love about this bundle is it has everything from my classroom procedure slides, my super improver wall, classroom jobs, etc., all the things. So even if you want, some ideas on what it could look like other than the typical strategies I talked about in the beginning of this week's content, make sure to check that out. Even if you're kind of wanting some inspiration, feel free to check that out and make them your own and kind of get ideas on, ooh, that would work really well with my classroom management style, that one not so much. And if you want to take it a step further, I created a community of new and first year teachers, and we are talking about classroom management in this community. I walk you through everything from how to manage your classroom on autopilot all the way to planning and prepping 2 to 4 weeks out in advance. As I said, I'm a systems kind of teacher, so of course I have systems to run my entire classroom. So if you're wanting to see the systems that I use for not only classroom management, but for communication, lesson planning, organizing, all the things, make sure to go check out that community. We would love to have you. And one thing I like about that is we have a annual classroom management challenge, which is starting really soon. So make sure to check that out. Each day I give you a different prompt on one small thing you can do for your classroom management that'll take 5 minutes or less. And I give you a different scenario each day on a disruptive behavior and how I would address that in the classroom, which is really awesome. All right. That wraps up everything. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, remember we are stronger together, and I'll see you in the next one, Teacher Bestie. Bye.